I'm sure as most hoopers growing up, you may have had a crazy thought of one day being in the NBA, despite if the goal was realistic or not, or how many people telling you that you won't make it. With the odds of making it to the NBA being very slim, some people train their whole life so hopefully one day they could walk up on that stage when they hear their name called by the commissioner and fulfill their dreams. But others don't live out the glamorous life of being an NBA player that people assume it to be from the outside looking in. And that would be the case for former NBA player Larry Sanders. Here's the story of a short career of a player who had a promising future in the NBA. Being a late bloomer out of Fort Pierce, Florida, Sanders wouldn't play organized basketball until the age of 15. Having a variety of passions as a young kid, art would be a primary interest for Sanders to occupy his time being in a single-parent household. And crazy enough, his love for art led him to want to be an oceanographer as a kid before he would start playing basketball. Now, Larry wouldn't play basketball his freshman year as he would go to a private school that didn't offer a basketball program. So his sophomore year, he would transfer to Port St. Lucie High School as he would begin his massive growth spurt, growing from 6'4" his sophomore year to 6'6", where the high school basketball coach saw potential in him and ultimately convinced him to join the basketball team. And by his senior year, he would stand at 6'9". His development and massive growth spurt during his high school career would get the attention of some Division I colleges, one being Virginia Commonwealth University, where one of the assistant coaches began to come watch his games and watch him play. Being a double-double machine, as Sanders would average just under 20 points and 13 rebounds, leading his team to a 20-8 record, as well as winning their district championship, and he would end up committing to VCU after high school. In his 3 years at VCU, he would be a two-way defensive juggernaut for the Rams, averaging 3 blocks a game his freshman year, as he would turn into a star for VCU, winning the Defensive Player of the Year award twice in the CAA conference, as well as a 3-time All-Defensive honor in his conference as well, along with a 2-time All-CAA honor and an All-CAA tournament honor, averaging a near double-double with 14.4 points per game, 9.1 rebounds, and 2.6 blocks. After an astonishing 3 years of college basketball, Sanders would declare for the 2010 NBA draft, where he would be projected to get drafted late in the first round of the draft. But the Milwaukee Bucks would draft Larry Sanders with the 15th pick in the 2010 NBA draft, where his defensive tenacity that he played with in college would carry over to the NBA, playing above the rim and being a rim protector for the Bucks. Now, the Bucks would have subpar seasons as a team his first 2 years in the league, missing the playoffs, but he would continue to be a great contributor to his team's success, as he would have a game where he recorded a triple-double against the Minnesota Timberwolves in 2012, scoring 10 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 blocks. He would also have another great game against the Boston Celtics in 2012, where he would score 17 points and grab 20 rebounds on 8 of 10 from the field. With Sanders being one of the best defensive forwards in the league and everything going well for him, the Bucks would decide to make a long-term investment, keeping Sanders in Milwaukee. So in the 2013 offseason, Sanders would sign a 4-year, $44 million contract extension with the Bucks. Now, with the big contract comes the expectation to play at a high level and elevate his game year after year to show why he's worth the money he signed for. So when his contract comes to an end, the opportunity to sign for a bigger contract will come into play, with his player value increasing. But what also increased was the anxiety that Larry dealt with, as he would admit to dealing with anxiety. With the good and bad that comes with being an NBA player, mental health and mental struggles are something that many players deal with, as more and more players have came out over the years to speak about their mental battles they face being in the NBA and playing at the highest level. As Sanders would say, quote, "Anxiety is a big part of playing defense. I think there's a reason defensive players fall into that category. They use that anxiety." But unfortunately, things would take a turn for Sanders off the court, because in November of 2013, he would get into a fight at a nightclub in Milwaukee and would end up hurting his finger and would force him to miss 25 games. But that wouldn't be the only off-court predicament Larry would get into that year. As mentioned, he dealt with anxiety, and the use of cannabis is what helped him cope with it, saying that he didn't start using it until his second year in the NBA to help him deal with his anxiety for medical purposes, saying that it helped him when he played, as he would be second in the NBA in blocks per game, as well as average a near double-double that year as well. But it would violate the league's anti-drug program rule, and he would get a 5-game suspension for it. So in the summer, Sanders would have to volunteer to go to a rehab program for 90 days for cannabis use, as he was told that putting himself into a rehab program in the offseason would avoid him getting a suspension. But in the 2014-2015 NBA season, he would get another suspension for 10 games for violating the NBA's anti-drug program for the second time. Now the league is now different from when Larry was in the league, because reports would come out that the NBA will no longer penalize marijuana use. So what Sanders was being penalized for is no longer a penalization in the league. Now obviously there were alternatives the team would offer to help him deal with his mental battles he dealt with being in the NBA, but he felt that it wouldn't be beneficial in the long term, which would be the beginning of the end for Sanders in the league. Because in February of 2015, Larry Sanders would announce that he would be retiring from the NBA in only a 6th year in the league. And on February 25th, 2015, he would have a sit-down explanation video on his reasonings for why he decided to retire, as he would state that he would check himself into a hospital program for anxiety, depression, and mood disorder, where he would find out a lot about himself and where he would want to devote his time and energy, with basketball being a huge consumption in his life. He would also go on to say that he didn't feel like a human in the NBA, but more so a product, having to comply with rules and standards at all times, as well as hearing things in headlines without members of the front office letting him know if they were true. Now because he was retiring and still on a $44 million contract with the Bucks would agree to a buyout, leaving Sanders with only 15 of his $44 million contract after retiring. But it wouldn't be long until he made a short return after a 2-year absence in March of 2017. But he would get waived at the end of the regular season and would spend a short time in the D-League, which is now known as the G-League, which would be the last team he would play on. After his time in the NBA, he would transition to being an entrepreneur, being a writer, as well as being a music producer, as he would produce a beat that would get into the likings of Party Next Door called Don't Run, which was first cut and recorded and sent back by Drake before the final song being done by Party Next Door. And it would go on his P3 album in 2016, which would go gold. He would also go on to start his own incubator company for homeless artists called Citizens of Matter, working on different projects with them, as well as accommodating them with free clothing, help giving homeless artists from different industries, working with a producer, fashion designer, and photographer, the push and stability they need to turn their lives around through their passions. Despite not playing in the NBA anymore, he has played in Ice Cube's Big 3 League that runs in the summertime to still play and enjoy the game for the fans that tune into them. Although Sanders had a roller coaster ride in the NBA dealing with the highs and lows, as well as getting backlash online for his decision to retire, it's great to see that he's found his love and passion, as well as having success being an entrepreneur, music producer, writer, and artist. As we all know, you can't play in the NBA forever, and a high percentage of NBA players end up going broke after they retire. So I applaud that he made a decision that was best for him and his health, as well as pursuing his career path after the NBA.
Values and the relationship with the people I love around me, that's like my real riches, that's what the lasting, my lasting wealth. I understand that it's not what fuels happiness. Happiness isn't behind a golden gate. Happiness is really an internal thing.